How to talk about your weaknesses in a job interview. Hi, how are you? I'm Romulo Gutierrez. This is the Job Room channel. I've been a recruiter and talent selector for 27 years, and today I'm going to give you 3 simple tips to help you answer that dreaded interview question. Tell me about your weaknesses. First essential tip, you can't lie, okay? It's very important to understand that when this question comes up in an interview, usually by that point in the selection process, you've already taken some kind of psychological test or participated in another stage, maybe a group exercise. So there's no point in mentioning weaknesses you don't actually have just to hide your real weaknesses, okay? That doesn't mean you should mention just any weakness. I'm going to give you 3 simple examples of what you can say, but the first tip, really the main tip, is never lie, okay? A second key tip for talking about your weaknesses before I get to the examples is to try to mention weaknesses that don't, conflict with the position you're applying for, all right? Weaknesses that won't get in the way of performing the job you're applying for. Let me give you an example. If I'm applying for a position as an accounting auditor where I'll have to work with processes, do calculation analyses, and it's a very analytical job where I'll be spending a lot of time in front of the computer, if I say that my weakness is being a shy person and more reserved in my communication, that's probably not going to be a problem. It won't be something that ends up hindering my performance in the selection process. Why is that? An auditor can actually be shy and not very communicative. What they can't be is forgetful, someone who has trouble working for long periods on the same process, or someone who is easily distracted. So, notice that I can also choose which weaknesses I'm going to mention. I usually recommend something very simple, which is what? Grab a notepad on your phone or even just a sheet of paper. Split it in half, and on one side write weaknesses, and on the other side write strengths. And here's a challenge for you. You're going to list 10 strengths and 10 weaknesses. It's a self-awareness exercise, okay? In this self-awareness exercise, let's talk about weaknesses. Try to remember feedback you've received, things that bother you, not necessarily just professional aspects. Let's give an example. Maybe you get nervous over small things, or you're someone who gets really anxious when pressured for results. Go ahead and write down your weaknesses there. In the end, on your sheet or in your notepad, you'll have a total of 10, both strengths and weaknesses. Then calmly and intelligently, you'll select the points you're going to mention in the interview. Okay. 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses, always following those 2 principles I mentioned. First, never lie, because if this is checked against another psychological test, it could turn out really badly for you. And second, choose points that won't interfere with your performance in the position, all right? I have more tips about this. Before I go on, I'm going to ask you to subscribe here to the Job Room channel. There are always videos here, and they never disappoint. There are new videos every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Okay? So I'm going to ask you to subscribe, leave your like, and if you want to do a live online interview simulation where I'll interview you and give you feedback on how you did, whether you did well or not, and what you need to improve, in the description, there's a direct link to my WhatsApp, and it's also pinned in the first comment, and in a moment, it'll show up here on the screen as well. So you can reach out, and the prices are low for subscribers of the Job Room channel. Now let's move on to some more tips. These are the last 2 tips about weaknesses. Next important tip. When you talk about your weaknesses, try to mention things you've been working to improve. I think one of the most important principles in the job market in this 21st century, especially with the spread of artificial intelligence, is the human ability to improve, continuous improvement. I think that's a word that it has never gone out of style in the job market worldwide, but it's going to become even more important these days. After all, if we don't keep improving, if we don't seek out improvements, courses, training, and development, it's going to be hard for us to stay employed. That's just the reality. And to stay competitive in the job market. So When I talk about my weaknesses, I'm going to try to mention things that I've already improved or that I'm working on improving. Let's give an example. I'm applying for a job as a production assistant at an automotive factory, and they ask me, tell me about your weaknesses. I'm going to be working there really focused on parts on a production line. I can say, look, one of my weaknesses is that I'm a bit shy. In that role, you can be shy, that's not a problem. But to improve on that, I've been reading self-help books. I've even taken theater classes, specifically to help me open up a bit more and work on this weakness of mine. So try to talk about weaknesses that you are actively working to improve. Now, I've talked a lot about weaknesses and not so much about strengths. And I think strengths are also extremely important. And I'm going to leave a full video here for you on how to talk about your strengths. Go check it out, it'll really help you. Great preparation for your interview. Take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.